Hey, it's your host, Vito Chirco, signing on today for the 15th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Alongside Doc, the Doc from Doc and Jock, it's John Macaroon. John, what's going on today?
Vito, we're just recording the podcast, and right now, as we speak, as we're recording, Coach Caldwell has given his press conference, and he's saying that the Detroit media is the most negative media out there.
But you're 1-7, Lions and Coach Caldwell. You're pathetic.
My Twitter's blowing up. Wow, Vito. I know this is the Tigers Talk podcast, but man, this is horrible. This is horrible. We
should have left the team in London like we joked about last week before the game against the Chiefs. Then they get blown up 45-10. It was, a 7-3 game at one point? They scored 3 points, and that was it until the very end of the game in garbage time when they scored a TD, the first touchdown of the game. So they did nothing offensively after that first drive of the game when they scored the field goal, and that was it for our Detroit Lions, who should be London's Lions at this point or somebody else's Lions. We don't want to deal with them. They're pathetic, and they should deal everybody. They should wipe the slate clean. Don't you think so, Doc, at this point? Deal Johnson. Deal Matthew Stafford. Deal all the veteran, big-name pieces that are high-priced veterans. Because you know what? They're not going anywhere this year. There's no hope for this team in the immediate future unless you make moves, and really unless you start with the front office and get rid of those guys at the top of the organization. That is Tom Luan, the president, the GM, Martin Mayhew. They have to go. And Coach Caldwell is not maybe a great fit, but, for the culture of the team, he's better still than Jim Schwartz. Maybe you leave him there. I'm just saying you got to get rid of, though, for sure, Luan and Mayhew, because it starts at the top for the Lions, where they've been bad. And that's why they've been bad for so long, Doc.
I can't believe the nerve that Caldwell has to come out and talk like that. We're all mad on edge, and that's what you're going to say? We got to move on. Let's just get to the point. First of all, I'm really thrilled. I'm enjoying the ice cap way more than I should be.
Royals won it. You won it, Doc.
Victory for the Dot. Now you learned, Vito. You're the second now to learn. The Jock learned, and when you see in our Twitter at Detroit Podcast that he wore the Sparty green betting with the Dot.
I saw that on Twitter.
Wasn't that awesome?
That was awesome.
And now you had to buy me an ice cap because I correctly predicted. Now, I did have a little bit of insider info. I chatted with Mario and Pemba, and he picked KC in 7, but I didn't go baseball-wise. I went strictly, I'm being straight up honest, psychological. They lost last year, and the way that they played all year, you can tell as a sports fan when a team has that team of destiny, is trying to regroup and recover from a terrible disappointment. Last year's disappointment really fueled them, and they played great all season, and it carried over. That was the team, and the Doc's prediction was purely based on my psychological knowledge, knowing that they really fought, and they were the team of destiny, and they won it.
You know what? They weren't just scrappy. They were the best team in the American League and the best team in baseball this year. They deserved it. They had it coming. They had that bitter taste of defeat in their mouths last year after losing in Game 7 of the World Series to the Giants and Madison Bumgarner. They weren't losing this year to anybody in the World Series, and they proved that by coming back, by scrapping it up, by getting dirty, by clawing back in Royals fashion, Royals style, against Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight, in Game 5 on Sunday night. And they did it on the road as well in Queens at Citi Field, Doc. How impressive was that, and how unexpected was that? For me, it was still unexpected knowing the Royals have been this good come from behind team all year long, leading into Game 5 on Sunday night.
I wasn't surprised, Vito. The Kansas City Royals were built, because they were inept for so long. And so you built with high draft picks, with guys that were playing together in the minors. They came up together. And organizationally, they did it right. Remember, this is kind of out of the blue. They were the laughingstock of baseball for so many years. And everyone around town here would be like, when you talk about KC, you would say, no, not yet, not yet. And then all of a sudden, boom, they built a great team. This year, if you watch them play all year, the way they played the Tigers and the way they played the rest of the American League, they played great. It was a great season all around. Ned Yost got the boys playing great, and it was a fun World Series. And all you had to do is look at the stats. They were trailing several games beyond the 8th inning by more than 1 or 2 runs. And they'd come back. They were scrappy. Even in that 9th inning game, or even in that 9th inning of the clinching game, I didn't really believe that KC was truly ever out of it.
Well, Harvey, though, was cruising along, Doc. So you're telling me right now you expected, like Dayton Moore, the GM of the Royals, for the Royals to come back and win that game in a clinching game to win the World Series in 2015. You expected that truly after Harvey. The Dark Knight was phenomenal. He was Dark Knight-esque. And the ace of that staff, he showed off that material, those skills in Game 5 through 8 scoreless innings against the Royals. So he completely shut them down. But you still, with that being said, expected the Royals to come back and take that game right out of the Mets' hands.
No, I didn't say that they would take the game. I'm just saying that I was confident watching them that they were never really truly out of the game.
Okay.
They were scrappers. They played hard, And that's the way you want to build a team that will play hard all 9 innings, that even though they may be down a run, they still may come back. But we're going to talk all about it. I think Terry Collins made a huge mistake, and he came out and owned up to it. I like that about the manager. He said he stuck by his guys, and that's a guy you would respect and play for because he stood up for it. He said, this is my decision. I own up for the fact that I let my emotions get away of my head. And he knew the right thing to do was to pull Harvey. But, Matt Harvey did the right thing, and he did the right thing for himself. It's his job to go up to the manager and say, keep me in, keep me in. It's the manager's job to just have a chat with him. Fine, you decide to let him go out there and pitch that first batter, but it was a walk. Right then and there, as soon as that guy takes the first step to first base, my ass is out there, and good night, Harvey.
So after that walk, you would have said,
right away,
forget you, Matt Harvey. I know you loved being out here. You wanted to be this pretty performer and get out here for
Get to the closer.
Yeah, it was time for Familia at that time.
It was time.
And I think, too, that's the case. That's the truth as well for me and the feeling that I held on Sunday night when we were talking about it, tweeting back and forth at one another, Doc. I said that Harvey had to go back out there as well because of also the support of the fan base. The Mets, the Metropolitan fan base there at Citi Field, Doc, was loving the environment and loving the grittiness of Matt Harvey and the dominance that Harvey showed off through 8 scoreless innings. So they wanted him back out there for the 9th as well. And Collins gave in. He was bullied by Matt Harvey, but at the same time, he made the right decision to put him out there for the 9th to start the inning. It's just that in the 9th inning, once Kane walked to lead off the inning, Harvey should have been pulled. As you said, Doc, I truly agree with you on that one as well. But when we say that he was, as Collins came out and said after the game, that he was playing according to his heart and not maybe his head, his smarts as a baseball manager, baseball lifer, this guy that has known baseball, been around the game for a long, long time, he made that decision based off of what his heart told him to do in leaving Harvey out there. Does that make him a bad and or horrible manager in doing so, though, Doc? 'Cause I don't think other managers in that situation could have avoided that either. I think a lot of other managers would have also made that decision because of how dominant Harvey was and because of that home fan base.
Yeah, no, listen, majority of baseball is going to be split down the middle. You're going to say now, because we're looking at it hindsight, like the new podcast that debuted on Monday, the Hindsight 20 podcast. In hindsight, it's easy to speculate and say, well, he should have did this, he should have did that. Your star player, a guy that was balling, remember, you're up 2-0.
Yep.
So you still have a little bit of leeway.
Yep.
You're not up 1-0. If that decision was made at 1-0, I'm taking a flamethrower. I'm pissed and I'm lighting up this mic. But he was up 2-0. So you still got a little bit of leeway by bringing in your closer. But I do believe that the mistake was not in allowing him to go out there. The mistake was after that walk, you should have, not allowed him to pitch to another batter. But Terry Collins is a man's man. He's been in baseball for so long. And Mario Pemba, when I chatted with him, said that he was the manager there back in California of the Angels.
Yep.
And his style was a little bit more grating. He was a little bit more demanding. I think he's changed a little bit with age and more experience. Look what he's done with the Mets, a young team. Remember, I know right now, a couple days removed from the World Series, everyone's speculating, but really in the end, the Mets overachieved. With a couple of additions, you could be looking at the Mets next year in the same position as the Royals coming back trying to win the World Series. They got flamethrowers at arms. They got a good nucleus of guys with just if they have to make the right move this offseason, and Terry Collins is a guy that's proven now that he can manage a young team. I like Terry Collins. I think it's a minor violation, one that we can talk about on a podcast, but one that's not a fireable offense. It's not a Caldwell offense.
No, he's coming back next year. Caldwell is horrible. Collins is not. And even with the Halos back then in the 90s, mid-90s, he led the team to a lot of second-place finishes. Never got over the hump, over the top to lead the team to first place into the playoffs, as it was his first playoff appearance, by the way, for Collins this year in 2015. So he never had done it before in his managerial stint with those Halos back in the mid-90s. Came close, never did it. But still, with all that said, he has learned something. A lot of those Halos players back then, from what I've read, what you told me to, and what Mario and Pemba told you, Doc, did not truly like Terry Collins or thought maybe he was too hard and harsh on them at times. So the veterans didn't really see eye to eye with Collins at times. But these rookies, these youngsters of the Mets in their rotation throughout their lineup, throughout their roster, really saw eye to eye with Collins and meshed with him all year long. And it allowed the Mets to get as far as they did, losing in Game 5 of the World Series. But really quick to revert back to a point that we were making earlier about the fans and what they thought about the decision. They were loving life when he was put out there for the 9th again. They would have came out and had their flamethrowers, their torches, would have had those equipped and ready to go and to throw at Terry Collins. If he would have pulled Harvey after that 8th inning, after pitching 8 innings of scoreless ball, they would have been so PO'd that they would have tormented Collins for the rest of his life. And especially if Familia would have blown the saves then. If he would have blown a save then and there, they would have torched him, tormented him, criticized him for the rest of his tenure as skipper of the Mets. And that's why these fans that maybe are mad now at him for leaving Harvey in the game through all that, even after that first batter when he walked Kane, they're being hypocritical because they wanted Harvey out there for the start of the 9th inning. And the only thing that they can say is what you said, that maybe he should have been pulled, Harvey, after the first batter was allowed on base.
But now remember what happened and what occurred throughout the tenure of the series. The Mets defense got exposed, and you seen it and I seen it. That play by Duda at first base, oh my God, he airmailed that ball. Like, he threw that ball so far away from the catcher, it was like, whoa.
On the opposite side of the catcher, a perfect throw would have gotten him.
Yeah.
I still believe that. And Duda, if he would have made that throw and not have, if he wouldn't have made it errant, but because it was an errant throw to the opposite side of the catcher, and he airmailed it, like you said. So they could have gotten the Royals out then and there and won the ballgame. That would have secured the victory right there for the Mets. So the Mets blew it because of the lack of defensive prowess, too, and errors that were made throughout the series. So it wasn't just on the arm of Harvey and or Familia, who blew
exposed, right.
2 saves before that. Familia didn't have the defensive support behind him, and the defense ultimately blew it. Not as much on Familia because of that. Even though still, when you have 3 blown saves, obviously you can't totally defend a guy for that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's not one of those things where you really, like I said, the youth of the Mets, I know the New York media might be a little bit stinging regarding the play of the Mets. They didn't play to their potential. But remember, it's a young team. Not a lot of guys in the World Series. Not a lot of clubs with that youth are going to just go into the World Series and dominate, especially a team like KC. It would have taken the Mets' best effort plus a little bit more, Vito. I think that, going into the series, KC had the biggest edge. They had clutch players all up and down. I mean, look at the situation. He brought in a guy, late in the game who hadn't batted since October 4th. And you'll get me his name sooner or later. But he got a clutch hit. Everybody on the roster, even a young 20-year-old, got to play in that World Series. It was a total team effort. It was a great effort. I mean, it would have taken literally overwhelming effort by the Mets to get this done. And I don't believe that's why you saw in 5 games, the best team won. It was the Kansas City Royals.
And that's why the Royals won in 5 games instead of the Mets extending the series to 6 or 7. So for me, as you said, the Mets will be good next year. This is not all about them winning and losing this year or, the win or bust mentality. It wasn't win or bust for them in this year's World Series. Now going forward, they get better, upgrade their lineup. They can win World Series titles in the future. That's why this year, not that big of a deal that they lost the series. Now, if they would have been close and almost would have won it, you could have said, oh man, they lost their chance to win it and really blew it. And they did blow Game 5. They did. But there are years ahead of them where they can win. And that's why I think the Mets are in a good state, in a good situation, and will be fine going forward. The Royals were in a win or bust mode, though. They had to win, and Ned Yost, who's been criticized by me, other people, other pundits out there for a long time now, has been great in the postseason last year and this year. And he might have, at this point, I think he has now validated his status as a top-notch manager, or at least as a quality manager that should not be as heavily criticized as he has been leading up to this moment where he finally captured a World Series title after barely missing out on it last year. So with those 2 straight World Series appearances, Doc, for you, Ned Yost no longer is in the dumpster, right? He can't be in the lower tier managers anymore. And look at his numbers. His postseason winning percentage is among the best of all time now after last year and this year, Doc, too.
No, you know what, exactly right. When you heard, and really it involves people who are into the numbers, and they say that Ned Yost makes decisions that when you look at the numbers long term, that it really doesn't make sense. But when he rushed into that Gatorade bath, it was like vindication. Obviously, people who are against Ned Yost are going to say, well, hey, a lot of managers could have managed that talent to win the World Series. But I'm going to give him credit. When you win the World Series, when you take a group of guys who have lost the World Series, remember, the Tigers lost the World Series. Our manager didn't go right back and right away and do that. So Ned Yost took
returning to the Fall Classic
it's not
is
easy.
a big
First time since 1989 that a team that lost it before, the A's did it. Was the last time that it occurred in 89.
Look at you with some facts here, Doc.
Oh, I was watching.
Legend
I did.
knowledge.
Listen, I stayed up and watched the entire clinching game. I really enjoyed it. I said I was going to pick
it was great baseball, really. Wasn't it in the Fall Classic for a 5-game series win for the Royals? Despite that being the case, it was like a 7-game series with how good those games were, and really because of how the Mets blew the games and the Royals came back. And the Royals came back because they are a winning ball club. They proved to all of baseball out there, all the fans, all of their fans as well, that they are the best team in baseball with how they played in this year's World Series, clawing back at every chance they had to do so and taking risks. on the base paths, being aggressive as they were all season long. Eric Hosmer scoring that game-winning or game-tying run in the ninth inning, remember. Think about it, because he took a chance, took a risk. The Royals are that type of ball club where they're risky and they're talented, more talented than people have given them credit for, and than I've given the Royals credit for. They are more talented than I believe going into the season. I predicted the Royals to finish in fourth place. They are not a fourth-place team at this point. They are not. And depending on what they do in the offseason now, they could be this contender in the American League Central and for World Series titles going forward because they have that young core still intact, even with losing Cueto. And Gordon can't pick up his player option, or he might just become a free agent. Now, if he becomes a free agent, I still see him potentially re-upping with the Royals long-term because he's been that franchise icon, their best player, their veteran clubhouse presence for so long now there in KC. I see him wanting to return, especially after winning this year and being a part of this ball club, as I said, for so long. So if they get him back, that's really the key for me for them to keep contending for American League Central titles and World Series titles going forward, Doc.
No, I don't think that this is going to be the last run for KC or the Mets or the Cubs or the Dodgers. They're always going to be those perennial playoff teams because they got some money to spend and they got some good people in the management position. So right now, it's the era of these teams. It's the era of KC, the era of the Cubs, Pirates, Dodgers, Rangers. Those are the solid teams. You know, you always have to be worried about teams like the Red Sox and the Yankees and teams with big spending abilities and capabilities. You always got to, worry about those teams. But right now, there's just a select few that you would believe are really serious World Series contenders. Look out for the Cubs. Look out for the Mets. Look out for KC. And it's going to be a fun 2016 season. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what moves are going to shake out, how the Tigers fit in, because it really kind of sucks because KC got to the World Series and won it before the Tigers did in their last run in '84. It kind of hurt.
Disappointing. They had last run in '85. I was horribly miserable after seeing them win in Game 5. That's why I didn't want to see the Royals win and kept dogging them, kept dogging Cueto to a certain degree with him. But the Royals as a franchise, as this year's version of the ball club, I dogged them for a lack of talent, for overachieving, for being lucky. But you have to be lucky to be good. But it still sucked. It still stunk when I saw them winning that World Series trophy, when I thought the Tigers should have won it, deserved it more at one point. Obviously, everything hit the fan for the Tigers. They fell on their faces and fell to the bottom of the AL Central. Disappointing in that regard. And then in the same year where the Tigers miserably underperformed, underachieved, and finished in dead last in the American League Central, the team who has been chasing us finished in second place last year and has been miserable for even a lot longer than the Tigers before the Tigers got good back in '06, finally catapulted to become World Series champions. After all that time off from being relevant, from never winning an American League Central Division title until this year, was their first time winning a division title in the American League Central, and the first time winning a division title in so many years. I think since '85 when they won the American League West, as it was back then, when they won it all in '85 with George Brett as their leader. So after all that time off, they get back to the World Series 2 years in a row where the Tigers couldn't do that with Jim Leyland. And he was a great manager, I think even better than Ned Yost. And they had a more talented ball club, but they couldn't do it, couldn't accomplish that feat. Then these pesky Royals, the division rivals of the Tigers, do it, and then win in their second try, when the Tigers lost in 2 tries, counting '06 and 2012. So it was mightily disappointing as a Tigers fan. But I think it's a reason and motivation for the Tigers to keep fighting, clawing themselves to get back in the hunt for the World Series and to make moves now this offseason, which means opening up their checkbook big time. And Mike Ilitch has that ability. Will he do it? That's been a topic for many editions of the podcast. I think he will because he sees the writing on the wall. The window maybe has closed or is mightily and rapidly closing, and especially now with these Royals on top. This is motivation for Mike Ilitch and the Tigers to spend now money to sign some starting arms and frontline starting arms and to reinvigorate this ball club as a whole with the lineup needing some upgrades, but specifically, as we've talked about on previous editions of the podcast, the rotation and the bullpen needing significant upgrades. And that's what I see the Tigers doing because of this now. This is motivation, and that's my point, Doc. What do you think?
You know what? What I loved about the Kansas City Royals was the knockout nature and the easy flow in which once they got the lead, you knew you throw in Davis, you knew you threw in those guns in the bullpen, and it was a wrap. I mean, Wade Davis got up there, boom, 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 and he was throwing darts. Closers that were effective. It was just nice to see because all we asked for as Tigers fans was to build a good starting pitching, a solid to above average bullpen, and the Tigers would have had success. All you had to do was basically follow the Kansas City model. And you neglected to find talent in that bullpen. Look at that bullpen of KC. It was so awesome to see that all they had to do was get it to the 6th, 7th inning with the lead or scrape and claw. They were never out of the game. And so in the World Series, they were never really in doubt to really lose a game.
That tells you you're a winning ball club, too. That proved to everybody, to the state of baseball, to the United States, to everybody in the world, that the Royals were the best team because they proved they were never out of a game, no matter what. And people knew that. They had the confidence, too, knowing as a ball club that all their players were good enough collectively to come together, to come back in any game, no matter the deficit. And they did it once again in Game 5 and in Royal style. Wasn't it fitting that they won the World Series, clinched that Game 5 to win it all in that fashion, from come from behind fashion? Fitting of the Royals. They did it. They're World Series champs. But let me tell you this much. They're not going to be World Series champs in 2016. They will be a good ball club once again, another contending ball club towards the top of the AL Central. But with some guys missing maybe next year and needing some upgrades, they got to open up now their checkbook, as the Tigers, I think, will. And that's the thing with these Mets and Royals. Small market ball clubs based on their budgets, specifically their payrolls going into this year. Look at what their payrolls were. The Mets are supposed to be this big market ball club, right, where they have a high volume amount of spending and have a payroll above, 150, 175. They were at what? They were barely at 100. The Royals were barely there or below 100 mil for payroll.
Yep.
Both very low payrolls, and they got it done significantly, in big and grand style. So that tells you, too, these teams that they spend now a little bit, they might take that next step to be even better. And the Royals, for them, it's a scary thought thinking about that. Yeah, but really, it's about that. I think these teams do have to spend now. And will they? Because they didn't have to get to this point. But now the Mets kind of need some upgrades. They do. Look at their lineup. They need something there. An added bat or two, or maybe just re-signing Cespedes. And the Royals, well, they open up the checkbook to re-sign Cueto. Because remember, they just had a trade for him to get him this year. But it was only half a season. Can now they retain their staff ace for 2016 and for the long term? Big question marks facing the Royals and the Mets. And we'll discuss some of those topics now with our guest who's coming up on today's podcast, and that is Mr. David Hill, the editorial director of Fansided MLB and the lead editor of KC Royals Fansided blog, which is called Kings of Kauffman. We'll be right back with David Hill of Fansided.
Doc here for FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Visit FanaticU.com and rock amazing gear if you're a Pistons fan, Lions fans, Wings fan, or Tigers. Definitely go visit FanaticU.com for a wide selection of hats, T-shirts, and if you shop online, use the promo code DSP at checkout and you'll save 15% off your entire order. Anything at all that you want to buy. If you want to buy a Tatar shirt, a Dylan Larkin shirt, if you want to represent the Pistons now, who have been playing very well, and get Andre Drummond gear, go visit FanaticU.com and check out their wide selection. And don't forget, everybody loves saving money. At checkout, use the coupon code, the promo code DSP, and you'll save 15% off your entire order. FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter. And now back to Tigers Talk with Chirco and company.
All right, and now joining me on the 15th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is Mr. David Hill, the editorial director of Fansided MLB and the editor of Fansided's KC Royals blog, Kings of Kauffman. David, what's going on today?
Not much. How are you doing?
Very good. And first and foremost, let's dive right into it, the World Series talk, and Mets skipper Terry Collins and his decision to leave Matt Harvey, the Dark Knight, in for the ninth inning on Sunday after the Dark Knight had thrown already 101 pitches through 8 and then walked the leadoff man, Lorenzo Cain, in the ninth. With that being said, Dave, did Collins make the right decision in allowing Harvey to stay in the game after pitching 8 scoreless? And what would you have done if you were in Collins' mighty large shoes at that point with New York's season on the line?
Well, I thought it made sense to put Harvey out there to start the inning. The Royals just hadn't touched him. He had given up 4 singles. He'd shut them down, so let him start. Let him start the inning, see what would have happened, because he said that Harvey wasn't going in Game 7 anyway. But when he walked Lorenzo Cain, I would have pulled him right then. You don't give the Royals an opening, as they proved all postseason. They just exploit every chance they have. And leaving Harvey in to face Hosmer just gave that opening that they needed. Familia hadn't exactly been great either, but he was the most dependable option they had. And after that first base runner, he should have gone to the pen. It's at least what I would have done.
Now, do you think he left him out there for that extra batter or to face Hosmer because of the lack of success of Familia in the World Series?
It's possible. I think he was I don't want to say traumatized by a couple of the earlier games, but I think that it may have been in the back of his mind that the Royals had already hit Familia relatively well.
And Dave, now according to Jeff Passan, I read this article from him. He's of Yahoo Sports, and he talked about how after seeing 8 shutout innings from Harvey, Royals GM Dayton Moore looked over at KC special assistant and former big league catcher Jason Kendall and said to him, "We're about to win a World Series." Did you feel a comeback was in the making and in store at that point as well, David?
I felt if Kane got on, it was a matter of time before they tied up the game in the ninth and then won in extras. As soon as he got the walk, at that moment, it's like, yep, Hosmer's going to come through somehow. They're going to scratch the second run across, and it's just a matter of time. When you get into a battle with the bullpens with the Royals, pretty much every team's at a disadvantage, and eventually the Mets defense was going to cost them.
Now, in your opinion, how much is Dayton Moore to credit for constructing this World Series winning Royals squad?
I think he deserves a lot of credit. He built this team a very different way than you see a lot of teams built these days. He identified defense and relief pitching as areas that, the Royals, as a relatively small market team, would be able to exploit and have a strength over other squads. He specifically went out and looked at players that made strong contact, that didn't strike out, and that could use their speed to put pressure on the opposing defense. It's almost a throwback to the 1980s in a way. The Royals teams of that time where you had players like Willie Wilson, flying around the bases. It's worked. The Royals are a very different animal than a lot of other teams in baseball, and I think that being so drastically different, the opposition doesn't quite know how to handle that at times.
Do you think this World Series victory by KC motivates other AL Central clubs, like the Tigers, to spend big this offseason? Or does it do the opposite maybe, Dave, because of how this Royals ball club was largely constructed by Moore, which was not by spending a bunch of money on free agent players?
I think that this is going to motivate other teams to re-examine how they have their roster set up. The Royals have, last year you saw teams like the Yankees and the Astros go after more relief pitching based off the way the Royals bullpen was. You saw Luke Gregerson get, $18 million. You saw a lot of high-priced contracts for middle relievers, setup guys. I think this year you'll see a few teams look more at the defense contact players. A player like Jason Hayward already was going to get a decent contract. I think his value increases even more given the success that players like that have had in Kansas City. You'll see maybe, it doesn't affect the true sluggers too much, but I think you'll see a lot stronger market for the contact players.
And like the Royals' own veteran clubhouse leader in Alex Gordon, right, who has proven to be a great two-way player since moving over from third base to left field. And with that being said, has a $12.5 million player option for 2016. So he can get some big money on the open market. Will he opt out, though, of his current contract or take that $12.5 million player option for 2016? What's your take on that, Dave?
I know he says that he wants to stay in Kansas City and the Royals want to keep him in Kansas City. I just don't see any way he picks up that player option. I don't think his market is going to be quite Hayward. I think Hayward's going to get a $100 million contract or something thereabout. And Gordon is 5 or 6 years older. But I wouldn't be surprised if he got, 4-year deal around $70 million. I know there was one report that an anonymous GM source said that he couldn't see Gordon getting more than 3 years at, 36 to 40 million. But I think that is a pretty ridiculous idea. I could see the 470, and I think the Royals are going to make a strong push to keep him. It's the only franchise he's known. He grew up in the area. He's won a World Series there. If he stays, he has a chance to be the face of the franchise and take that mantle from George Brett, who still is at this point. He could be the next guy. And I think that may be enough of a lure where the Royals might be able to keep him, but it is going to be a little bit costly.
So do you think he would take a hometown discount then of sorts to stay in KC?
To a degree, I don't think it would be something like he takes, $15 million less to stay in Kansas City than to go to, say, New York if New York wanted him. But if the Royals offer is at least relatively close and say it's like $5 million less, I could see him taking that.
I know, the Royals want to retain Alex Gordon. Then there's also Johnny Cueto out there going on the open market for big money this offseason. What kind of money do you see him getting on the open market? And also, what are the Royals' chances of re-signing him for the long term this offseason?
I don't think there's any chance the Royals re-sign him. They have done a very good job of being able to identify middle of the rotation starters, guys like Volquez, Vargas, like Chris Medlin's going to be a starter next year. So you're really looking at one open spot in the rotation, and I don't think they're going to spend the roughly 23, 25 million a year I think it would take to sign Cueto for that spot, especially when I would think they're prioritizing Gordon and even Ben Zobrist over that.
Now, losing Cueto, though, from the top of the rotation, does that diminish what the Royals can do in their attempt to repeat in 2016?
Maybe, but it also depends on what it is that they do to replace him. Ventura looked like he took a step forward over the final couple months, even though he struggled at times in the postseason. Volquez was incredibly steady all year, and Danny Duffy has had his moments. I think that they're looking at having a player like having a pitcher like Chris Medlin step in, fill some of that void, because Medlin, prior to his second Tommy John, was a very good starter, and then sign another middle tier pitcher, or look to see what a guy like Almonte or Kyle Zimmer could give them during spring training.
Now, back to Cueto. Where could you see him landing then?
That's tough because there are a few teams that really need starting pitchers. I think Cueto is probably going to be the third domino to fall. I think you'll see Zach Greinke signed somewhere first. If Greinke leaves the Dodgers, then I could see them being a major contender for him. Boston, the Yankees theoretically could use a top of the rotation starter like Cueto. There's a few clubs that could use him. Even Detroit.
Yes, they
Detroit
could.
doesn't need that guy.
I know that much, and that's why I wanted to open it up to you. How about the Tigers then signing Cueto? I mean, what would it take, you think, for the Tigers to attain Cueto this offseason? How much money, how many years do you envision?
I think Cueto's time in Kansas City has somewhat lessened what he's going to get. He wasn't exactly great in Kansas City, and he did have his moments, especially in Game 2, but it's not like he really lit the postseason on fire either. My thought is he's probably going to get around a 6-year deal, and I wouldn't be surprised if it went, say 5-6 years, 125, 150 million, around 20, somewhere around 23, 25 million a year.
So now answer this for me before I let you go on today's edition of the podcast. What do the Royals have to do this offseason to repeat as champs in 2016?
Well, the repeat's going to be tough. I mean, they have a few free agents. I think they need to re-sign Zobrist and Gordon. I think those are two major priorities. They need to continue their ability to just identify arms that are, for whatever reason, undervalued. Chris Young signed for under $1 million, and look at how valuable he was. It's mainly they just need to be able to keep doing what they have been doing and hit on those middle tier guys in free agency.
And with that being said, Mr. David Hill, Fansided Kings of Kauffman, great stuff from you today, and also make sure to check out his work for Fansided MLB. Have a good one, Dave.
You too.
And big thanks to David Hill of the Kansas City Royals Fansided blog, Kings of Kauffman. Very nice name there, unique name for that blog, Kings of Kauffman, and it's named after, obviously, the stadium where the KC Royals play. And then also, he is the editorial director of Fansided MLB. Check out all his work there. And once again, at Fansided's KC Royals blog, Kings of Kauffman. Great stuff, great insight from him on his Royals and what they have to do as well to have a chance at least to repeat. But he even said it himself, as a guy that covers the team, knows the team like the back of his hand. He said it will be hard for the team to repeat in 2016. And I believe that to be true because they could lose Zobrist, could lose Gordon, and they're going to lose for sure Cueto. There's no doubt about that. And that's what David said as well in our segment.
No, it's very insightful. I'm glad that, I guess he echoed the sentiment of most people regarding the whole Terry Collins decision, is that most people agree that after that walk, it was time. And he's
That's what you
it.
thought. You said it
Yeah.
yourself. Look at you. Right?
Oh,
You're not a baseball expert, but you like talking the game, watching the game. You watched that game, and you thought the same thing as David Hill, a guy who covers the team for Fansided.
Yeah, no, I agree. And but in the end, though, it was a great World Series. Where do you think this World Series ranked among the last couple? In terms of it wasn't exactly ultra competitive. I know KC dominated, winning the last couple of games.
But did they really?
Mets,
Did they really dominate?
They didn't.
They won. They were
won.
better. They deserved it. But the Mets were in those games for the most part. To a large degree, they were in every single game until the very end because they blew a lead or something. They could have won this World Series. Not that they should have, because the Royals, as I said once again, and repeat my sentiment from earlier and just a few minutes ago, deserved to win it because they were the better team this year than the Mets.
The way I'll put it is they were dominant at the right times in the 8th and 9th innings. They were able to come back in key situations. Besides the opening game at Citi Field in New York, they played really solid and they were in most games. And meaning that when it was crunch time, you knew the momentum was going to swing towards KC.
And think about it. These veteran arms of the Royals were money when they had to be. Volquez, Cueto in Game 2. And I dissed Cueto for so long. I trolled him, didn't I, John? And you called me out on Twitter about it because he came through in that Game 2 start at Kauffman Stadium. But what I told you in response to that, to play devil's advocate, it wasn't on the road in New York under those bright lights. But he still did it in prime time in a marquee game, a game that the Royals had to have to a certain degree. Because the Mets, remember, the Mets could have, should have, won that Game 1, remember. Mets blew that as well, another game they blew. If they would have won that game and would have lost Game 2, because I think they were going to lose Game 2 no matter what, because Cueto's been dominant at home all postseason long. It was much worse on the road. That's why Ned Yost put him in Game 2 to start, instead of to start Game 1, and that meant he would have started Game 5 as well in that series clincher on Sunday. I don't know necessarily the Royals would have gotten it done, though, with him on the mound in Game 5. As sad as that may be, I think it's true, to a certain degree at least as well, because he has struggled so much on the road. But that's not important to this point. It's beside the point that I'm trying to make here, because I was just kind of trying to make the point that those veteran arms that maybe you thought wouldn't have gotten it done for the Royals, maybe would have been outpitched, outdueled by the Mets' young starters, by Harvey, DeGrom, by Syndergaard. Guess what? They outdueled those starting arms of the Mets to a large degree, including a guy like Chris Young in Game 4, remember. Came out of nowhere, signed for less than $1 million, as David Hill said, of Fansided MLB. He came over here on the cheap, came over to the Royals on the cheap. That was a bargain pitcher you got pitching in Game 4. He was not expected to be pitching in the World Series, okay? So the Royals getting lucky a little bit, but also being smart and making some shrewd moves, some cost-efficient moves, and that's much to the credit of Dayton Moore, the GM, the lead constructor of this Royals franchise at this point, and of this World Series winning Royals ball club. The first time the Royals won it since '85 when George Brett was the clubhouse leader and the best player, best two-way player on that Royals team. And the best two-way player on this year's Royals team, and who has been for a while now, is Alex Gordon, the converted left fielder, being converted from third to left. He went down to the minors, was struggling. He reinvigorated himself, worked on some stuff, refined his craft, and got back to the majors playing left field. And he's been a Gold Glove, multiple-time Gold Glove winner since then, Doc. And much credit to him and what he's worked on to get to this level, at an all-star level now, defensively and even with the bat.
Now, with Kansas City, in terms of their performances, what do you attribute their success to this year? I know I said that losing last year was a challenge. I believe that they have a great mix of young talent. The starting pitching is not all that effective, but they do just enough to get them to where they got to be and give the team a chance to win each and every game. And once you get to the 6th, 7th inning with the lead, that bullpen was lights out. Overall, though, I think the leaders, Hosmer, Moustakas, the young talent that came in there, that was able to just perform at the right time, was really fascinating. I think the team unity was strong. I think top to bottom, you could really call Kansas City a true team. And that's what I like to see in sports, a collection of talent that works together and puts it all together. And that's why I think they had success. And I really do believe they wouldn't have been able to have this team success this year in 2015 had they not tasted failures in such a way that it was used as motivation.
You keep speaking that as your sentiment about the Royals. And
that's what I
think
believe.
It's true. I believe that it is true what you're saying. And you know what? Underrated is Ben Zobrist, too, what he did with the Royals down the stretch.
Adam loved him.
Adam loved Zobrist. Tigers could have gotten him, maybe should have. Now, they weren't in contention, but in the past, they could have dealt for him. And he was available, mightily available at the deadline, because the A's were retooling big time and really rebuilding. They dealt him to the Royals, and ever since he got over there, he hit for them, hitting .284 with an on-base percentage of .364 in the regular season. Good for an OPS of above 800. That's all-star level material from a batter, and specifically a guy who was playing second base for the Royals over Omar Infante. So he was a huge, significant upgrade for the Royals at second over Infante, who was miserable in the first half for the Royals. So without Zobrist, they might not have won this year's World Series. I'll give Zobrist that much credit because of how bad Infante was. They needed to acquire somebody, and they did big time in getting Zobrist.
Yeah, it brings a funny point. When they were celebrating and they started, calling out the starters and things like that, Just looking at KC, I'm like, wait a minute, Omar Infante's on this team. What
You
happened?
forgot about him, didn't you?
But he had a rib.
He hasn't played.
He had a rib injury. Yeah, this year he struggled quite a bit.
Yeah, he did.
But he had a rib injury going into the playoffs. So, but yeah, Zobrist was a major upgrade. Oh my gosh.
Zarilla. I mean, you had Infante, who was a light-hitting guy all year long, couldn't even really get it done in the field. Then Zobrist is close to Gold Glove caliber, good enough at least at second, can make those good plays, routine plays consistently, and really better with the glove as well. With that being said, then Infante. So they upgraded big time and needed to upgrade, and they did in getting Zarilla, Ben Zobrist. Big ups to him, to the Royals for getting it done. And it was a collective effort from the Royals, as you said, a real team effort. And now it's about, for them, what are they going to do in the off season? They're going to lose Cueto, as I said. He's not coming back regardless of the circumstances. I think regardless of the money that they can offer him, because it won't be enough to re-sign Cueto for the long term. So he's gone. And then there's Zobrist, who's a free agent. Gordon, who could pick up his player option or choose free agency. If he tests the open market, Gordon might not come back to KC either. But guess what? As David was saying, he might be the franchise icon now, the best player in franchise history, if they keep winning at this high of a rate, at this level going forward. That's why you need Gordon. You want to keep doing that efficiently at a consistent high level when it comes to winning, you need Gordon playing in left field. That's why they have to re-sign him. That's the first priority, and David was getting at that as well for the Royals. He's going to get paid handsomely. Not north of $100 million maybe in totality over 5, 6, or 7 years. But he'll get 3, 4 years. Let's say 4, 5. I say 4 at least. 4 years and a solid $12 million per year, if not $15 million per year. That means the Royals have to open up the checkbook, their pocketbooks. Will they to re-sign Alex Gordon, though, in the offseason? I believe they will entertain the idea big time because they know they need him. And I think Gordon might take a hometown discount of sorts, as David was saying during our segment. Doc, though, your opinion on Gordon and whether or not he'll return to KC in 2016.
Hey, I know it really, for every player, it depends on the situation, what offers he may get. After winning a ring, you don't expect, they can't re-sign everybody. And for athletes, it's after winning a ring, you can say, okay, then it's about time to take the best offer. But for me, I realize when I'm talking about this and looking at it, I'd be a guy that'd be willing to take less than market value to stay with the winning team. Dude, winning is fun. You see how much fun they were having?
They loved it. They were loving life,
Johnny
man.
Cueto up there behind? When they were dominating in the extra innings and getting that big inning that they had. Everyone was having fun. So if I was Alex Gordon, I would stay with Kansas City. They're not only poised to win this year, they're going to be competitive, maybe not winning at all each and every year, but they're going to have success. And what's great is, okay, fine, you don't want to go stay in Kansas City. You want to go out to the West where it's challenging with the Angels and the Rangers, or you want to go out east with Boston, Tampa Bay. They struggle a little bit, but they may, with some young talent, some good moves, be up and coming. With Boston, you don't want to go there. Where do you want to stay?
Dave D, the man, the wheeler and dealer.
Stay in the Central where it's nice and easy, nice and breezy. You just got to deal with Detroit and Chicago and the Cleveland Indians.
Please don't diss my Tigers like that. Come on now.
Listen,
getting at my Tigers who are going to be better next year. They got to make the right moves.
They couldn't win with Scherzer, Price, and Verlander. That really,
that's
if you
in the
look
past
at it
now, man. That's in the past. Forget about who is Scherzer.
If you couldn't win with
Scherzer, who's that?
So you're going to win with Verlander, Sanchez, and Daniel Norris?
No, they're going to sign somebody. They're going to sign Cueto. David brought it up. Cueto is an option. I dogged him for a long time. He might be a Tiger, though, next year in over 5, 6
Yeah, you know what's going to happen?
He's got to be good then if he comes here.
He's going to be Vito's Cueto when he comes here.
Oh, he will be.
Yeah,
no longer KC's or the guy that I dogged. He'll be the best pitcher on the planet. But you know what? If he is, I'll love him because I love the Tigers.
No. What I'm saying is our luck, he'll come here. He'll be the guy that you dogged all season.
Oh, you're saying like that bad quality? Yeah.
He'll be inconsistent. You won't get outs. We'll have up and down. He'll be like 15-15.
That would suck.
And then we'll start the first game of the World Series and get shelled like 9-0.
Like Verlander did against the Giants in 2012. JV, our best starter. That would be Tigers-esque.
You got the reference, Vito. Good man. I was saying if you caught that. That was very good. Vito. Good job.
And you know what? They can't deal with the pressure, it seems like, the Tigers. Not to revert our attention to them or focus entirely on
this is Tigers talk.
It is, but they've been dismal, and we love the Tigers. We talk about them, and we have a lot more episodes right of the podcast going forward. I think we might do it bi-weekly during the offseason, but a lot of hot stove action to break down and dissect. And we know the Tigers will be making moves with Al
Yeah,
Avila.
maybe next week we'll just do a little segment on what the biggest stories this year were in recapping the Tigers and Major League Baseball, too. So, and we'll definitely, I think bi-weekly is good, and whatever you like to do.
I mean, it's about you approving it.
Whatever you want.
I wanted to say really quick, once again, I approve of what the Royals did this year after all that. Give my stamp of approval. With that being said, remember, they did it collectively, and they did it, as you said, too. Wade Davis was their closer. That means, they didn't have their closer from the regular season. Greg Holland, who wasn't great, he got hurt, though, was out for the entire postseason, and they still won. They still won without a guy like that in the back end of their bullpen, a guy in Wade Davis who was the 8th inning guy, wasn't a closer before, got it done, was so sharp. Tigers would just wish to have that happen, to have one guy step up and be their closer. And then the Royals have how many closers in their bullpen? They're so lucky, but they're good, they're talented, and that's why you can't take too much away from them and what they did. Even though maybe they benefited from the American League being a little bit weaker than it has been, and the Central Division being weaker because the Tigers were so bad, and the White Sox, a team that underachieved, were so bad and should have been better.
Before we end the podcast this week, I really got to, let your boy know. You had a guest on, and his name slips my mind as we chat, but he was a Washington Nationals guy. So
Michael Natelli, who's actually also a Fansided.
Yes, so you're gonna need to send out a tweet from the doc, and it's gonna go like this: Michael, per doc of the network, Dusty Baker, all caps, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. Dusty Baker, that guy's got to be the luckiest manager on earth. The dude's done. I mean, I know he's a baseball mind.
He's made the playoffs.
He's done
made the World Series.
Yeah.
Made the World Series in 2002 with the Giants.
Yeah.
Had a good team, but led that team. He's a good clubhouse guy.
You know what he's known for?
But he's a
eating
retread
the seeds.
too.
He's known for eating the seeds and spitting them out funny way and when you watch him he's like always chewing and spitting and he's the biggest retread I've ever heard. Dusty Baker for the Nationals.
He's a baseball lifer. He can handle a clubhouse, and that's what the Nationals need right now. I don't think he's a great analytical mind.
If your boy Natelli listens, Dusty Baker.
Please, he should be listening now, and he deserves a shout out about this. I kind of want to get his
Dusty
opinion.
Baker,
and maybe he'll be on next week's edition of the podcast then to break all this down with Dusty Baker getting the nod over Bud Black, my guy, a more analytical guy and more of that fresh mind because of that.
Dusty Baker, my God,
career retread. I mean, the biggest of them of the fish out there that you could have hired because Gardenhire's out there. They turned their attention though to Dusty Baker, but he has made the playoffs. Is a good clubhouse guy. Can lead this team in the right direction, and at least more than Matt Williams, the previous skipper of the Nats. Maybe not better or more than the guy that they passed up on in Bud Black because they couldn't work out a deal with them. Did you hear about that too? They wanted Bud Black, but they couldn't come to terms with him on the right contract terms. So Bud Black goes to somewhere else now maybe, and that'd be really fitting to the Nats to really dig in at the Nats if Bud Black went somewhere and won where he goes. Because I think he deserves another shot at being a manager too. After being the manager of the Padres for a long, long time and never having a very good ball club to work with, as we know, because they're a small market ball club.
Great podcast, Vito. It was really
very
good.
Good. And that's it for today's edition, the 15th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco & Co. Thank you very much to David Hill of Fansided's KC Royals blog, which is called Kings of Kauffman, and he's the editorial director of Fansided MLB. Great stuff. Check him out there. And thanks to DetroitSportsNation.com for hosting us as usual, and to Doc and Jock and everybody from the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next week for another fresh batch of Tigers Talk and Major League Baseball news and notes. Talk to you then.